And good evening, everyone, and welcome to the season finale of Tigers Tonight. I'm your host, John Maddox, and it's one of those things. It's a happy, sad day. I am very tired at the end of a football season. Got some frequent frequent miles on my vehicle this year, but it's sad because you look at it and you basically work in the spring and you work in the fall and you play about, I think I counted up like 55 hours of football, and you have months and months of work. But anyway, so one more game left in the season. That's the national title game. But we we will move on here. So joining me as always, the best co-host in all the land. We will start with our friend with the sore throat, the one and only Brian Moss. Brian, how in the world are you this evening?
Doing pretty good. Enjoying the spring-like weather up here in New York. It was 62, I think, but here in the next couple days it'll drop back down in the 30s. So yeah, a little sickly in the air, but
I was
we're
like I
doing
said,
all
that's
right.
probably great for the sore throat, 60
Yeah.
today and 30 the next day. And
Yep.
joining us as always from the palatial estate of the Marley Manor, one and only Larry Marley. Larry, how are you this evening, sir?
Well, I just want to echo your thoughts on how this is really bittersweet, right? I mean, this podcast is the last of the year, and it's such a season finale. And every year, there's such a buildup. And you and I talk about this, basically from early July, basically, until the season starts. Like you're just like getting pumped, right? Because spring football just enough to whet your appetite, right? And then you start really getting into it. And I really always feel like every year, while there are parts that's a dog part of the season, every year I do just feel like, man, I would go back and do it all again right now if I could.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would too, but I don't know. It's just like once it ends, it's like, okay, I'm glad that's over. And not for, a lot of people are tired this year because of the way the season went. And it's not that. It's just, going to practice 2 and 3 times a week and being at a game for 5 or 6 hours on a Saturday. You get tired. But before we get into anything else, I do want to give my best thoughts I'm sure we all echo this, to Damar Hamlin. What an awful and just almost bone chilling and, just a frightening situation, Brian, that occurred on the field. And I, I just don't have words, and I'm a little upset that the thought even crossed anybody's mind to go, "Hey, all right, 5 minute break, stretch those hammies, and let's go." Giving CPR on the field, just and as somebody who dealt with something very similar with COVID, I know that probably brought back some not so great memories, but just an awful story.
Yeah, and I can't say I'm surprised, but yes, I was surprised that some folks were, on the Twitter muck saying, just get him off the field and let's play ball, basically. And I'm not just like that's this is different. You should realize it's different when you have both teams huddling around, so the cameras can't see what's going on. You kind of know it's something serious, and you can see the expressions on folks' faces that was around him that's in tears. There was just no way you would think that that game should go on, and it's tough. It's sad. It's a physical sport. I mean, everyone knows that, but there's some things, stuff happens, and it's just like you have to take a step back because life is way bigger than football.
Yeah, and we don't know exactly what happened, nor and I want to say this publicly. It's none of our business what happened. I don't know where we got this sense of entitlement that we should know somebody's private medical information. But, it looks like what possibly happened is a condition where if you take blunt force trauma to the chest at, I think my wife said within, you've got like 3 or 4 milliseconds. It can actually put you into cardiac arrest, and it appears that that's what happened. But he's got a lot going for him. He's in great hands in University of Cincinnati Hospital up there, and I think Larry, as you texted me, one thing he's got going for him, He is young and in absolutely peak athletic condition, and that definitely helps.
Well, and one of the things I was reading, a cardiologist today that said, "Hey, look, do not jump to any conclusions. There can be unknown, heart problems that people have that never manifest themselves, and then just when you get to be a certain age, bam, they just pop up. So before we jump to any conclusions, they need to check and see, does he have an underlying condition that could have caused. There's a lot of people wanting to jump to conclusions about COVID and um, and vaccines. And for the love of God, stop. Just stop, please. I mean, my God.
It's amazing how quickly people move from being immunology experts to foreign affairs experts
Cardiologist.
on
Yep.
Ukraine's, and now congratulations, they've all become cardiologists
They're the
over the
best.
past 2 days. Just incredible. But all of our thoughts and best wishes to him. And just what a terrible situation. And guys like Skip Bayless compound it by saying stupid crap online, and just awful. But anyway, so the Tigers played a bowl game 2 weeks ago. I apologize, we did not have a show last Wednesday, but the 7.5 hour drive back from Dallas was just a bit too much for one day. I should have flown in hindsight, but I didn't. So there we are. So
And you're not
Brian,
as young as you used to.
no, I am certainly not
Not
that.
young and not in
If you,
peak
if
physical
you
condition.
20 years ago, you could have done it.
20 years ago, it's really funny you say that, because like 20 years ago, let's see, whenever WrestleMania 17 was, so that would have been about 20 years ago. Me and my buddies drove down the night before, and after WrestleMania ended at like 10:30, we drove from Houston to Memphis. Now there were 2 or 3 of us, and we switched off. But now that I've made that drive for a cruise, there's no way in hell I'm doing that in one day coming back. I can do it going because you're all excited and pumped, but coming back, no way. Anyway, yeah, I'm not like I used to be, and Larry's dead on. I am not in peak physical condition by any stretch of the imagination. But Brian, let's get started. Memphis wins 38-10 in the bowl game over Utah State. And I got to hand it to the guys over at Southern and Hollywood Pod. They tried to tell me all month how terrible Utah State was, and I wasn't buying it. But boy, that was a bad football team.
Yeah, and no, I think they could have played better. I mean, because I know they were bad, but there was indications there that Memphis, could be in trouble if they didn't play well. But I think Memphis played better than expected, because what I was expecting was what we saw every single game this year: them shoot themselves in the foot. Take one step forward, 16 steps back, and you didn't really. I don't think you really saw that in the bowl game. Just so kudos to the staff getting the kids ready. I mean, it was to me it was a game that Memphis needed going into the next season. You go on a 28 point spread there that you won by, so you have something to build on. You have Seth coming back. I mean, you have obviously wide receivers. You'll need to improve on. Offensive line you need to improve on, but you have something that that you put on tape that you can say, listen, I know all year it's been up and down, but we got it right at the end. Now let's go forward. Let's build on this. And kudos to them, because it was a pretty good performance by Memphis, especially in that second quarter. To me, that second quarter was really where they stood out.
And bowl games are one of those things, Larry. The bowl games can go either way, and like it seems like there's never a middle ground. You're either LSU or you're Purdue. And for those who didn't see it, LSU beat Purdue 63-7, I think it was. And they're almost seemingly, although I will say the Liberty Bowl seemed to kickstart some fantastic games. And one more thing I want to jump in here. Hats off to Tulane, man. That was a hell of a game and a hell of a win for the conference too. And but Larry, I think Memphis came out and did the things they needed to do, and with a couple of minor exceptions here and there, probably Memphis's most complete game this season.
Well, so they go out. I wouldn't think. I know that Utah State wasn't good, Brian. You're right, but I don't think they were the worst team that we played all year. And yet we came out and dominated a team that was, while we were definitely more talented, right, guys? I mean, there was more talent. I mean, I can go back to games where Temple, for example, where Temple's probably not as good as Utah State, right? And yet we didn't do what we did to Utah State, right? And we won every single phase of this game. We won offense, defense, special teams. We won the turnover battle. We won the time of possession. We ran the ball when we needed to. We ran the ball, passed the ball when we needed to. And we did exactly, John, we used to say, you pass to score, you run to win, right? I think Justin said that. Was that Justin that said that? We did exactly that. We passed the ball in the second quarter. We got a lead, ran the ball in the fourth quarter to close out. And so when you say complete game, that's exactly how Memphis needs to play next year against we have to play better against good. But I mean, Seth was 20 of 29. We only had the one fumble, which was on the sack. And so yeah, I mean, this was a good team that we came out and dominated. And I think, Jeb, you're right. They probably are better than Arkansas State.
And they are a year removed, and Ryan talked about this ad nauseum, from winning the conference, from winning the Mountain West 2 years ago. But they just, and then, Cooper Legas got hurt, and that doesn't help. And then the freshman has to come in. Memphis holds them to 135 yards passing. But Brian, my big takeaway from this game is, as bad as the performances have been this season, that might be the worst passing offensive line play we've had all year. It was dreadful.
The offensive line for Memphis? Yeah, it's well, one good thing, it's season's over. I mean, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Anymore this year, anyway. But and that's one good thing. We already know the offensive line coach is gone, wide receiver coach is gone, special teams coach is gone. What are the three areas that we've been harping on all year long? That's it's gone. They're out of there. And the kids that they have coming in to visit the transfer portal, it's O line heavy. I mean, I think this coaching staff knows that next year is a do or die season. 6 wins is not going to cut it next year. 7 wins to me is not going to. To me, 8 wins won't cut it next year. That's just my opinion, because the schedule is so light. Your hardest, you only have technically in the conference, in my opinion, you have 2 hard games. They're at home, and you don't play Tulane, who won the conference this year. So next year, and everything has to go right for next year. But yeah, for the bowl game, it's in the rearview mirror. Thankfully, you ain't got to worry about that offensive line for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I was expecting that against the run, but the lack of blocking for Seth was just a little unnerving. But a couple guys talking about wide receivers. I thought Eddie Lewis, Rock Taylor had a good game. Gabe Rogers had a good game. Joe Skates had one big catch. I thought the pass, obviously, Seth, spread the ball around like he always does. John Hassel had a wide open touchdown and just couldn't pull it in. It was a balance. You had Lewis with 5 catches, Rogers and Taylor with 4 catches each, and then a bunch of guys with 1 catch, and Priestcorn had 2. But you look around at the running game, and Sutton Smith carried the ball 6 times for 21 yards, and 5 of those were in the first quarter, and he didn't get back on the field. Asa Martin did what Asa Martin does. He was 10 carries, 50 yards, lost 7 yards, so he averaged 4.3. Jay Ducker averaged 6.4 yards a carry and ended up with 88 net yards. I think between the two of them, or I think that Asa Martin and Blake Watson especially, is because Ducker's still eligible next year, isn't he? Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
So you're going to have basically 3 guys and 4 if you count Sutton Smith coming in. And, if the offensive line can improve, you're going to have enough talent at backs and receivers to really be special offensively, despite losing Javon Ivory, despite losing Cam Wright, despite losing a bit of a surprise, Caden Priestcorn. I'm not really surprised. Ivory was a mild surprise to me. Cam Wright was not. Priestcorn was a huge surprise to me that he's leaving, but because he had announced that he wasn't, and then he is.
I mean, I guess we can say like he had worked out a deal, and then somebody came and topped his deal. Like that's the bottom line.
Well, and then there's another factor that we're not going to get into with all that, but
Yeah.
The offense is setting up next year to be really good. My consternation with next year is on the defensive side of the ball, especially the secondary. I guess Zay Collins is a linebacker, right? I kind of put him as that cat or whatever they call it. Everybody calls it something different.
Monster, yeah. Sort of the mix between a defensive back and a linebacker, right?
Who was the kid back in like 2003 when we went to the bowl game that kind of played that position from MUS? What was his name? Scott?
Yeah, the white kid.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, and I've erased it from my memory because Mother's Unwanted Sons are just not my favorite school. But Simmons.
No, Jeb will tell us because I can't.
Jeb.
I have no clue. I can't remember what I had for dinner tonight. So, but anyway, Memphis finishes 7-6, and one of the great things, Brian, is Memphis doesn't have a losing season, so that streak rolls on since 2013.
Yep, and believe it or not, I mean when I say recruits, it matters to recruits, but yet it's not very important. So when you go to a kid and it's like, yeah, we haven't had a losing season in X amount of years. I mean, it's like, oh, okay, it's like a sort of eye opener. It gets you in that door. But I mean, to me, it's very, very important. We'll talk about games of the years and stuff like that a little bit later on in the show. But this was a very important because it didn't get the monkey off your back as a program, but you kind of like got them off your shoulder. You end the season with a winning record. You extend that the winning record streak. I mean, now you have 2 bowl wins as a head coach. There's only one other coach?
3 if you count last year.
No, you can't because there was no contest. Yeah, Tommy and Ryan.
Yeah, so I mean,
didn't and Mike didn't.
No, and it just there's a lot to point to going in the positive direction, but there's also a lot to point to that needs to get fixed. So it's as a Memphis fan, you're kind of like in limbo, but you're at least hopeful for next season because of everything that's coming back, everything that's happened, the teams that are leaving, the teams that are coming in. Memphis has the opportunity to be the school. When you talk about the group of 5, they can be that school that goes to the New Year's Six Bowl every single year. And 2024, when the playoffs come, you can be that school that goes to the playoffs, if not every single year, every other year, or 2 out of 3 years. To me, Memphis can be that program.
I think the one kind of what's the word I'm looking for here? Scott Vogel, that was his name. I knew I had to look because it was going to drive me crazy. I think UTSA is going to be really good in this league. I think there's a lot of teams that have a chance to be good. I think SMU, of course, they're going to be solid. If USF has the right coach, again, that's the one that has forever vexed me and perplexed me. Like, how are you bad? I know you're bad at geography, but how are you bad at football if you're USF?
But Memphis has a leg up.
Yeah.
On almost all those schools, Memphis has a leg up.
The
They
only
have
one,
the quote unquote infrastructure. I mean, you have the facilities. Where Memphis is lacking, I think, is because it's a Memphis is a basketball school. The donors to the football program. That's where Memphis is lacking right now, and that's where I could see UTSA, because they do have
yeah.
football boosters. They can quickly become, the UCF. So I can see UTSA passing Memphis. But when you take a look at all the other schools, USF has the potential to pass Memphis, but I just don't see that for this foreseeable future. ECU, can they get back, to being what they were? I don't see it. I don't see the long term success for them. So to me, yeah, UTSA and Memphis, yeah, Tulane. If Willie Fritz continues to stay there, but he's been up and down throughout his coaching career at Tulane, so you can't say they're going to be at the top every single year. But Memphis, I keep harping on it, or I keep saying it, Memphis has that opportunity to be that school every single year, because I think everything is in place for them to do it. They just have to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like UTSA is a lot of people underestimated them when Memphis played them, and I think some people are still underestimating how good they can be because again, much like USF, like how can you not recruit in Texas? Like even if you get Texas and A&M's leftovers, let's say, that's still pretty dang good.
Yeah.
And, it's a lot easier, even though you have the P5, G5 thing going. But to me, it's going to be a lot easier to recruit to San Antonio than it is Lubbock.
Well, I'll go all in here and just say that to me, UTSA and Memphis has some similarities in that if you look, there are kids that would much rather go to San Antonio than go to College Station or go to even Austin, because Austin's a little odd. It's got its own vibe, and so some kids aren't into that. And College Station is the middle of nowhere, sort of like Oxford or Starkville. So if you can recruit a kid to San Antonio, to say the kid's from Houston, right? You can recruit him to San Antonio and say, look, you don't have to go to the middle of nowhere or Freakville. You can come here and you can live in the city. And I'm serious, like that. Look, that sells. SMU's been doing that for years, but UTSA has an even more advantage than SMU. It's a much larger school. It has more to offer in terms of opportunities educationally, and like you guys said, they're going to have a lot of NIL money. So to me, UTSA is the one that they could build a monster there. They really could. And they play in the dome. I mean, they have which the Saints used after Katrina. So it is we all know that is a very nice facility. Now it's not NFL quality, but it's as nice as any college facility that's in the AAC right now.
And people also don't realize San Antonio is the 7th largest city in the country. Almost 1.6 million people. So anyway, that program definitely is going to benefit to a move to the AAC. But Bryan, I think you're right. I think, in the aggregate, if you go over the long haul, Memphis and UTSA should be the class of this league. It should be Memphis, UTSA, and Boise State and Coastal or App State kind of every year fighting for that top group of 5 spot. And that's frankly something, and then is our Coastal and App State going to be able, and I'll add them in Liberty, are they going to be able to sustain success? Or are they going to be victims of, you have a quarterback who plays great for 2 years and then Alabama graduates one and comes in and snatches him up because of NIL. So that's going to be interesting. Memphis and UTSA and all this group of schools, we're all kind of USF, we're all kind of right in the middle. You can't always come in and get our starters, but you can come get our backups. But it's this weird spot to be in at the top of the G5. But I think you have a handful of schools. Maybe San Diego State is another school that can, legitimately have some. It's one thing to do what Tulane did this year, and I'm not knocking it. Everybody knows I'm the world's biggest Willie Fritz fan. Although, what a bonehead move! The onside kick was, and chasing the 2 points was just dumb. But I'm a big Willie Fritz fan. But the question becomes, can Tulane sustain that? But hey, shout out to the folks that went to the Cotton Bowl. They had a massive crowd. It was probably, if it wasn't bigger than Memphis's crowd, it was pretty close because they packed it out, and credit to them. But can they sustain that over the long haul? Because they've got some limitations academically that will not, allow them to just go out and hit the transfer portal every year. Tulane's one of these schools they can't miss, right? Like they can't go get a guy and he's just not any good. They got to replace Tajay Spears next year, who might be the best running back I've seen in person. That kid was incredible. And so it becomes sustainability, right? That's why, but I said it for years that Boise State was a couple of 8-4, 9-3 seasons away from being irrelevant. And they are. Like they have kind of dropped off the map of relevancy. But I think schools like Memphis and UTSA and if, again, UTS or USF can right the ship, and San Diego State, and then two of the Sun Belt Conference USA conglomerations, one of them, that's 5 teams fighting for one spot. And I really think there might be a year where you get 2 in but everything else has got to fall right, obviously, for that to happen. But, I just think Memphis is in a good position. And that's why, Bryan, I think you're dead on. This next season is just absolutely do or die for Memphis.
Yeah, to me, it's vital. I know on Twitter someone was being a little snarky, or was like, "Oh, I can't wait for another 6-6," or is he safe next year at 6-6? And I'm like, I don't think so. Next year is definitely the do or die, because you can put everything together. And I've already said it on this podcast, and yeah, that I think Memphis is a 10-win team next year. And with the only 2 losses, maybe one in the conference. But what do they? I can't remember who they have next year. It was the P5. Is it Mizzou? Yeah, so I mean that I maybe Mizzou, and take a pick in the conference. Who you have at home? I think SMU is at Memphis. But next year I think Silverfield is going to put together a staff that finally gets it, because whatever the case may be with the offensive line coach and the special teams, I don't know what happened, but I think he knows he has to get these hires right. And when you take a look at the wide receiver coach that he hired, Larry Smith, from UAB, fantastic coach. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of former players. I'm like, what makes Smith a good coach? And every single person I've talked to so far is pay attention to details. He's a hard nosed coach. You have to pay attention to the details with him. I mean, if you're not paying attention to details, you're going to be in his doghouse. And what would you see with Memphis's wide receivers? There wasn't a lot of paying attention to details. I mean, a lot of drop balls. There's a couple of games where route running, I thought wasn't the best. Seth maybe, thinking of receivers going one way, but they actually went another. So paying attention to details, I think Larry Smith is an excellent hire. The O-line coach we may hear, pretty soon, whether it's promoting, David, to that position, or, going outside. One name that I would say take a look at for offensive line coach, if he doesn't promote David, is Greg Austin from FIU. Take a look at his resume and where he's been. When he was at Nebraska, I think he was there 4 years. 3 out of the 4 years he was there, they averaged over 200 yards rushing per game. There's some definitely talented coaches out there that Silverfield can get, and I think he's going to do his due diligence and hire the right coaches. Because to me, you have the players, the talent's there at Memphis. I mean, the talent was there this year. It was, but they didn't put it together. And to me, that's I kind of lend more of it was on the coach's fault this year than the players. Because how many times have we seen the same mistakes over and over and over again? So to me, coaching was a big part of the issue this year. You have some coaches that are gone. Silverfield will get this fixed. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, home schedule next year will be SMU, Tulane, South Florida, Navy. Memphis will visit North Texas, UAB, Charlotte, and Temple. And I've said it from the beginning, if I were a betting man, UAB will be either the Friday or Saturday after Thanksgiving. I think that's going to be our kind of designated rivalry game. So
I was
next
wondering
year,
about that, John. So I firmly believe you're right. You're going to have SMU and then UAB. That's how I think generally will go. And so that will be our close of the year, basically forever. UAB will be the last game, and SMU will be the week before. I've speculated that because only because A, I think proximity, and B, that's sort of your two rivals, if you will, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Memphis avoids UTSA next year too. So
that's who they avoid. I thought it was Tulane they avoided, but it's UTSA that they avoid.
Okay. Yeah, we have SMU, Tulane, South Florida, and Navy. All right, so let's to kind of put a bow on the 2022 season. We will start with our offensive player of the year. I got a feeling I know which direction we're all going to go, but Bryan, I'm going to start with you anyway.
Yeah, definitely no one on the offensive line. I mean, it's got to be Seth. I mean, who else can you say? I mean, it's a shame that when I was looking at stats, I think this is the first time since 2011 that Memphis hasn't had a 100-yard rusher in a game at any point in the season. I mean, that's Larry Porter-esque. I mean, so they have got to get that fixed. But offensive player of the year, I mean, who else on the offense that you can give it to? Chris Howard? I mean, seriously. So, I mean, it's either him or Seth, and I choose Seth.
Larry?
Well, I think Seth is the obvious choice, but I'm going to go different. And this is this person that won't even be back. I'm going to go with Caden Priestcorn, and I'm going to defend it this way. Yes, he was the second leading receiver on the team, but he had the most receptions, and I believe he had the most targets. And I know he sort of fell off at the end of the year, but he filled in for Sean Dykes, and we all sat around hand-wringing, wondering, who was going to take this role, who was going to step up, who was going to be the receiver. And Caden Priestcorn came in and became Sean Dykes, and those are some big shoes to fill, and I applaud him.
Well, Seth is the easy answer, right? Because he's the engine that makes everything go. He was much better this year running the football almost to a fault, where he ran sometimes when he should have kept his eyes downfield. But I'm going to go Eddie Lewis because, when the preseason started and everybody called him Steady Eddie, I was like, I mean, he did go to Rutgers. I mean, come on. How steady can he be? But, that dude just, of all the receivers, he was the most consistent. 615 yards, 7 touchdowns, tied with Priestcorn for the most touchdowns, average a little bit over 14 yards a catch, or 14 and a half yards a catch, second on the team in that category, or third on the team in that category, or second rather, behind Joe Skates, who averaged 23 yards a catch, our feast or famine guy this year. But I'm going to go Eddie Lewis. And again, Seth is probably the offensive player of the year, but I just thought that there were several times this year that Memphis would have been lost without Eddie Lewis, because he seemed to be the only guy that could consistently get open and get some separation, because Ivory couldn't do it. But, Javon Ivory had 46 catches this year, but it was quiet. He didn't dominate. He just had 2 touchdowns. But I'm going to go Eddie Lewis. All right, Let's move to the defensive side of the ball. And Larry, we will start with you on this one.
The guy that I was thinking about all year, and I'm just going to go with Zay Collins. I thought he came in this year. Obviously, he led the team in tackles. But, man, the guy had 2 sacks. I mean, he had 3 picks. He just did it all. And I know that I'm taking the obvious one off the board, but, guys, I mean, Zay Collins was the defensive player of the year.
B?
Yeah, I mean that's who I was going to pick because I mean to me the way I look at it is the way I pick Seth. You take Seth out, Memphis I don't think gets to 7 wins. That's why I picked Seth. If you take Zay Collins out, I don't think Memphis gets to 7 wins. You take some others out, I think you still get there. The only other person, in my opinion, is Quindell Johnson. Because you take Quindell out, I'm not sure Memphis gets to 7. But so to me, it's between those two. And last year, I'd say Quindell, but this year, Zay Collins. I mean, he was the heartbeat of that defense. I mean, he was all over the place, and when he wasn't on the field, it was noticeable. So to me, it was Zay.
This is one I really thought about. And I will admit that his personality swayed me a little bit. I'm going to go Quindell. It says a lot to me. Yes, you have the on the field stuff, and my God, 111 tackles for Zay Collins this year, 3 interceptions, 2 pass breakups, a quarterback hurry, 4 fumble recoveries, a forced fumble. But then you look at Quindell, and you look, and Jeb just said this, like when Quindell wasn't in the game, it may not have shown up on the stat sheet, but that's a guy who called your plays. That's a guy who was the center of your defense. He had 77 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, 4 pass breakups, a forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries. And to me, it was just kind of that, you could take 5 or 6 guys probably and make up for Zay Collins' stats. But what Zay and Quindell share are the fact that you can't survive without them on the field, right? Like, just even if they're not making plays, Quindell can take away the middle of the field. He can take away half the field. Zay's all over the place. He allows guys like Jeff Canton, Arku, and Tyler Murray and Jalen Allen to make plays. Like, that's how good Zay is. But Quindell, I'll just say it. Quindell came up to each member of the media this year after the ball game and thanked us for covering the team. And just, he answered the tough questions. He answered the couple softballs I lobbed him. He never shied away from it. And to me, that's kind of why it's Quindell for me, because he's such a complete guy on and off the field. But it's really hard to pick between those two because, man,
Quindell's very easy to root for too.
He is. He is such a good kid. He's got such a great story. And, Zay's easy to root for. And, these guys, they gave it their all. And then, of course, when Johnson missed that game at ECU, you saw that show up on the field. But yeah, I don't think you go wrong with either of those guys. All right, so let's go now to game of the year. And Bryan, we will start with you on this one.
To me, the game of the year is the last game. It was the bowl game. I mean, I know I'm picking all the easy answers, but I mean, all the questions we're going to have tonight are really because of the way the year turned out. Really, the right answers is the obvious answers. I mean, there's other games that Memphis won that you're like, maybe the game that was right after the 4-game losing streak. Like, finally you won. But to me, it was the ball game because you soundly beat Utah State when you were not at your best. If Memphis was at their best, oh man, they could have had at least 50, 60 points. But you didn't play your best game, and you still won by 28. So to me, it was the Utah State game.
Larry?
I'm going to go with the game we didn't win, and that is the ECU game. And
Man, that was a great game.
Great game. Look, you lost, and it was horrible. We should have won it. And it's the game of the year for other reasons too, because John, you mentioned this, and when we were in the middle of it, it's hard to admit that this was true. But we've gone through the Houston thing where they, the flukish Houston thing, and then you go and just get kicked in the groin with that, and that really set up a 4-game losing streak for us. And fortunately, we had Tulsa on the schedule, so that saved us. But and no offense to the guys in Tulsa, but it just is a fact.
Boy, you just made both their fans very angry.
Yeah, they're all and my uncle's going to be up there next week, so he's just going to get tarred and feathered. But regardless, but all kidding aside, yeah, that's the game of the year because it was a great game and it changed our season. Because I think if we win that game, I don't think obviously we don't have a 4-game losing streak, but I don't think we lose. We may lose to Tulane, but I don't know. Like I just lay that out there.
I kind of went back and forth between 2 games. Obviously the bowl game, because that's the last thing you see. And again, just a dominant performance. Even though it was probably our most complete game of the year, we probably still left 21 points on the field. I want to go with either Tulsa or North Alabama. And everybody said, well, you just beat up on a bad North Alabama team. It would have been really easy for Memphis to win that game 24-0. That would have been really easy to do. You come out, you just put 26 on the board against Tulsa, and then you come back the next week and you put 59 nothing. And you beat a team the way you're supposed to beat bad teams, right? Like we beat a couple bad teams this year. Like we should have beat Temple by 35 or 40. Like they weren't good when we played them. Tulsa was terrible. We probably left 3 touchdowns on the field in that one. That should have been another 55-10 type deal. Navy was dreadful. We could have named our number against them, but Navy's just one of those teams you just don't run it up, against Navy. But I guess I'll go with the bowl game because that's how you're remembered by this season, right? It's in my Twitter bio. They don't ask how, they just ask how many. And, it's always good to end the season with a win. Because it beats the alternative, right? Like I think it's just 42 teams in the postseason with a win. So, anyway, I think it's Utah State. But yeah, I mean, lots of good choices there. Tulsa would be a good choice because you lose that game, now you're in a 5-game skid, and you beat North Alabama, and you've got to win at SMU. And I think that was the difference. You didn't have to win it. You should have won, but you didn't have to win at SMU. All right, Bryan, we'll start with you. High moment, high point of the year.
The bowl game again, because I mean, once again, to me it's an easy answer because you end the season on a high note. Going into next season, you can kind of forget. Yeah, it's hard to, but you can kind of forget about the 4-game skid. You can forget about all the little things, the coulda, shoulda, wouldas that happened during the season. But at the end of the day, 7 wins. And, what was most people's expectations was 8 wins. So you're really 1 game off of what you expected going into the season. So, if you're that person that said, I was expecting 8 wins, you finish with 7, you don't feel so bad. You're only 1 game off of what of what you were expecting. So to me, the best moment was that bowl game because, like I said, you end the season on the high note. You go into next season knowing you won your last game, and you don't have that awful taste in your mouth of losing the game.
Larry?
Yeah, Jeb just stole what I was about to say. It was the last drive, the Arkansas State drive, where the crowd just goes crazy, and Blackman basically loses his cool gets, I think it was 2 or 3 straight. It was 4th down. I think it was 4th and 3 or something like that. And I'm sure Jeb will correct me, but it was 4th and short, and they got 2 straight penalties.
False starts. Yep.
False starts, right? and we ended up holding them on 4th down, and won the game. And that was a game we were trailing in the 4th quarter. And so, to me, the crowd really getting into that game and bringing the team, to me, that was the best moment of the year.
Back to North Alabama, and the fact that it ended 59-0 on the day they retired Danton Bartow's jersey. Best defensive player Memphis has ever had. It was perfect, right? Like it was, as Don Poirier used to say, only in the movies and in Memphis. Like that couldn't happen any other way. And I was just so happy for Will and for their family. And, Danton, I knew Danton pretty well, and I was glad to finally see him get his flowers, as the kids say. And that did my heart good to finish the game 59-0. And I know that externally, Coach Silverfield said, "Oh, that didn't really come into my mind, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't what I was trying for." But I think that deep down, the players knew what was going on. And it was just a great moment for me. All right. So now that we've done the good, it's time, Larry, your low point of the season.
Oh, it's got to be Houston. That was the worst post-game hangover that I've had in a long, long, long time. It took me 2 days, 3 days to get over that loss. That was brutal, and it was hard to watch in real time. It's hard to even think about. That is the one game this year I will not go back and rewatch. Period.
For me, I was going to pick Houston, but really I wrote down, and I don't know if you could see it, but yeah, I wrote down worst moment, any game in the 4-game losing streak. I mean, but it started with Houston. The way, I mean, you had twice you had a big lead in the 4th quarter. I mean, I can't remember. Was it 11 points with 2 minutes to go? Something like that.
Let's just don't.
So yeah, it's the Houston collapse, because that 4th quarter was just, oh man. And but you could pick a bunch of them in that 4-game losing streak. East Carolina was a winnable one. Tulane was winnable. UCF was winnable. Questionable calls, in that game. So to me, pick any game in the 4-game losing streak, but it's hard to say anything but Houston, because that's I think Houston is what broke Memphis, because they didn't play the same for a good month after that game. So I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to say anything but the Houston game. But yeah, that started the ball going the wrong direction.
Even though they won a couple games, I don't think Memphis was the same team the rest of the year. So I've kind of got 3 plays. I got super duper specific here. Jeb already shared one of them. 4th and 16. What are you doing? Punt the damn ball. Like, that was just ridiculous. And then to go in the press conference and say every coach in America would have done it, it's a gray area. No, not on 4th and 16. It's not. Punt the ball, especially since your defense was playing pretty well. The onside kick against Houston that they recovered, just to have that one playback, like, forget everything else, just to have that playback. And then this is another one of those that doesn't show up, but the onside kick for Memphis in the second half at Tulane that Memphis could have easily recovered down 7, and nobody went for the ball, and it bounced harmlessly out of bounds. Those 3 plays were kind of enigmatic of Memphis's season. And Jeb's got another one, the pick right before the half at ECU, missing Asa Martin wide open against ECU on a 2-point conversion that would have tied the game.
I can't remember I spazzed out on your first one. What was your first one again?
The Houston onside kick,
Oh, okay.
just the
Now,
simple play.
another play that gets
We-
me is during the ECU
After
game.
this podcast, we will never mention that game again.
What was it? The Houston or ECU game that it was? They couldn't tackle the quarterback. It was like 3 or 4 missed tackles.
It was
the
Houston. It was
Yeah, it was
4th
Houston.
and
It was 2.
16.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
4th and 16. They converted a first down.
Oh.
But just and we look back and it's like there's 4 plays that just broke the season for Memphis. And we talked about it every week. Attention to detail, little things, as I say all the time, little things become big things. And you just, and some people roll their eyes about the Tulane thing, but I was right on the 50 when that happened. All Memphis has to do is turn around. There wasn't a Tulane player. There wasn't a Tulane player within 10 yards of the ball. And all Memphis has to do is turn around and they recover. And they had all the momentum. I know Larry texted me and texted us and said, it's easy to play when you don't have anything to play for. But Memphis had fought their way back in that game and had a chance to go down. And at least, if that ends up 38-35 with 2 or 3 minutes to go, who knows how that game goes.
I mean, you're tightening some booty holes for sure.
Yeah. And so if you recover that and just special teams, 2 special teams plays hurt us this year.
Let me throw a question out to you guys that I just thought of. What's one player that you think is going to have a breakout year next year?
Oh, it's easy for me. Blake Watson from ODU, the transfer. That's easy for me.
For you, for me, a kid that I think is. I mean, he had a good season this year, but Cromartie Hamilton. Yeah, I think he had 4.5 sacks this year, but I really think you're going to hear his name a lot next year.
If he's given a chance, Sutton Smith. He's the shiftiest runner that we have, and he finds holes that the other backs don't find. If they give him carries, Sutton Smith will have a good year next year.
I guess I'm going to go ahead and say it too. Asa Martin, I mean, that's just a guy. If you use him right, if you call the right plays, but I think people are going to be very surprised with how good Blake Watson can be. Look, these offensive skill positions are freaking loaded. I mean, you've got 4 running backs, you've got 3 or 4 receivers. You got a guy in Eddie Lewis who's just steady Eddie, who's just going to go out and catch the football. You can take guys like Asa Martin and Blake Watson, and you can put them in the slot. You can spread them out. You can throw a damn screen pass to them every now and then. That's just for you, Brian.
We had a screen in the bowl game, and it worked.
Yeah,
give me more screen. I'm going to make that a T-shirt.
Settle down, Clay Helton. That's a throwback for Memphis fans there. That was all we done.
Screen, okay.
That's all we did was run those damn bubble and tunnel screens with Clay. Was it Clay or Tyson? It was one of the Helton brothers. I think it was Tyson.
It was Clay.
It was both of them, actually, because they were both here, I think, at the same time.
Yeah, but Tyson wasn't the OC. He was.
Yeah, I'm with Jeff, man. I love Asa Martin. I just love everything about his game. And I think, again, he's a difference maker, right? And next year, he's going to be the kind of unquestioned leader in that group. Where he's going to be this will be his 23rd year of eligibility. It just seems like that. He's on the Darryl Hackney plan.
And he needs to be the starter. We talked about it.
By the way, you kid, but I was in Birmingham right before Christmas this year, and Hackney is part of their. He does something for their athletic department, and that dude was like doing some kind of show for the UAB. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, this guy is still around. It's like he is like a thorn in my butt. Like every time I look up, there's Darryl Hackney. Like for those who don't know, like this dude beat our brains in every freaking he would come in with like 2 touchdowns and 5 picks, and he'd leave our game with like 7 touchdowns and 5 picks. I mean, it was insane. Anyway.
UTSA, their quarterback, if Frank Harris is coming back, it'll be year 7 for him. And Austin, I can never pronounce. Ani, is that how you say it? The kid at North Texas. He's like, I think he's going to be 30 next year.
But didn't he go in the
29,
portal?
he came back. He pulled himself out.
Ah,
So, yeah, experience will not be lacking in the league this year. Um, so on the spot, gun to your head, Larry, record next year.
It's either going to be 8-4 or 9-3. I don't see us getting out of the first 4 games better than 2-2.
Really?
And I don't see it. I mean, I think we lose to Boise and to Missouri. But you're thinking we beat Boise at home?
it's in Memphis.
Go ahead and finish.
Well, no, and then we either lose 1 or 2. But if you're saying we go 3-1, now you've got 10 wins on possible there, John. I don't know, but I'm thinking 2-2, and then either lose 1 or 2 conference games.
Bryan?
So
I've already said it previously on this show. I think it's 10-2 next year, and I'm sticking to it. With what I think they'll get in the transfer portal, and with what's coming back, you have both your coordinators, and I'm really really impressed with both coordinators. Matt Barnes, I think, will take a huge step forward with the defense next year. I think Tim Cramsey, he loves Seth Hennigan, and I think next year it's second year under Cramsey. When you have the same coordinator when you're a young player, that second year is usually the year you break out. And I think next year, just watch out. I mean, a lot of it too. I mean, it's got to be the offensive line. You have to get an offensive line, because what Memphis had this year was not even Sun Belt level, in my opinion. I mean, it was terrible. But with what they are recruiting and what they are looking at in the transfer portal, I think the offensive line takes a humongous step forward. And I really do see 10-2 next year.
That's going to shock a lot of people. I think Memphis goes 4-0 in the preseason or in the non-conference, because I've learned over the years, you never underestimate pissed off people. And this Memphis staff, the administration, the players, the fans, everybody knows that Missouri, pardon my French, chicken shitted their way out of a game in Memphis. And I don't think Missouri's very good. I don't think Dodgewitz is a very good coach. And I can't believe that idiot posted what he did about anywhere, anytime as he's flying over the Liberty Bowl. What a dope that guy is. Yeah, Jeb's right. I can't say that because I wanted to beat UCF's brains out every time we played them. I've never wanted to win a non-conference game as badly as I want Memphis to win against Missouri. I think Memphis goes 4-0. I'm going to go 11-1. I'm going to one-up Bryan tonight. But I think the
positive Paul has changed.
Yeah, I'm telling you. It's hey, baby, it's 2023. Got to turn over a new leaf. I just think that there is so much talent on offense. And this will be if there are a couple ifs. One if is the offensive line. That's a big if. And if Coach Silverfield turns it loose, this is a team that can win games next year 52-45, like offensively, if they turn it loose and figure out early that they're going to have to outscore some people, because I think the secondary is going to really struggle at the beginning of the year because they're going to have new guys and linebackers are going to struggle a little bit. You get the hard games at home if there are really any. You go to, you visit North Texas, UAB, Charlotte, and Temple. You get SMU, Tulane, South Florida, and Navy at home. Tulane, who knows? And a lot of my 11-1 depends on when we get teams. If we get Navy in November, although they'll have a new coach, I don't feel as good about it as I do if we get them the second week of September, because it's going to take them like it does every year to kind of get going a little bit. UAB is the hardest road conference game, not because they're great, but just because that's just going to be a dogfight every year. But I'm going to go 11-1, and I'm just going to go out and say it. And if you don't win 9 games next year, you're never going to win 9 games in a season.
I think it's eight or bust for Ryan for sure. I mean, if he doesn't win 8 games next year, 8 would be equivalent to 5 or 6 this year, right? I mean, he should go at minimum 2-2 in the non-conference. And guys, if there's more than 2 conference losses, then wow. I mean, wow. And I think, and I hope we record this, because next year at this time, if we're sitting here making excuses, then it's all right.
Yeah. If you're making excuses next year, it's already too late. Because I mean, seriously, we've talked about it. It's everything is lined up for you. I mean, I'm like you, John. I'm really interested how the schedule lays out. When do you play these teams? Because if you get Navy early, you always want to play Navy early rather than late, because they're always better later in the year. But I want to see how the schedule lays out. But man, it's lined up nicely. As of right now, looking at it in the future, man, that schedule is just, man, you're like, oh, you're itching to get to that next season already, because it looks pretty good.
And Jeb has a great point. You're trading UCF and Houston for Charlotte and North Texas. And again, you avoid UTSA and until the championship game. So we just gave kind of a regular season, because who knows how the whole championship game will play out. But yeah, I think 11-1. I feel like everybody knows that this is it. And when you kind of have a unity of everybody knows, staff, players, administration, when everybody knows, that's usually when good things happen. But now Ryan's got to let guys play. Like, you just can't, you can't not let guys play. You just got to go to your strength, and that's going to be tough for him to adjust. All right. So that's a nice bow on the season. We've all made our certain to be wrong predictions for 2023.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. We're right all the time, 60% of the time. And then how Will Ferrell said it in Anchorman. All right, so a little bit of an announcement here. Early in the season, or I'm actually midway through the season, those who don't know, Bluff City NIL launched. They are one of 2 big NIL collectives. And for those who don't really know, an NIL collective, kind of their job is to collect, for lack of a better term, boosters and such, to give money to help fund NIL projects. And if you don't know what that is, name, image, and likeness, and you've been under a rock for the past 2 seasons. But anyway, so Bluff City NIL launched this year, and I was approached October-ish about joining up with their group. And it took Larry and I and Bryan, all of us, some conversations, some heart to heart, and some, I had to think about it, pray about it a lot. But Larry and I have decided that for now, we're going to make that jump over to what's going to be Bluff City Media, which is the NIL arm, or is the media arm of the NIL group. And we're going to start a new podcast in February at some point. Now, does this mean we hate Bryan and we're tired of putting up with a damn Yankee? Absolutely not. Nothing could be further from the truth.
It's just that he's so damn positive.
Yeah, that's right. We just got to get away from positive Paul here. But no, Tiger Sports Report will live on as long as it needs to. And Bryan's going to maintain the helm of that. And Bryan's going to be a frequent guest. on our podcast when we move it in the first part of February is kind of the game plan right now because my January is crazy. I'm pulling a Larry. I'm out of town in January more than I'm in town. Everything's not going away. It's not really going to be that different. We are going to be more focused like we were the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season on analysis and plays and numbers, and because it's easy to give opinion, but I think there's a big hole for analyzing plays and really breaking down what goes on in a football game. And this was not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but the kind of, I don't want to say, the impetus for me to do it was this is going to be a way to give back to our student athletes. And even though I'm a media member, I've got the credentials to prove it. I still care about the university deeply. And if I didn't, I wouldn't cover it because God knows if we didn't care about this university, why the hell would we have subjected ourselves to as much bad football as we did for so long? But this is a chance to do something a little different and to be a part of just a killer team of seasoned TV folks and media folks and video production folks and everybody who, the names I'm not going to get into because it's not really my place, but guys like Christian Fowler and Kenny Stubblefield who have covered the Tigers for a long time. It's a group of folks that care about Memphis, and more importantly to me, they care about the student athlete. And it's exciting, it's scary because it's new. But I don't want people to get this twisted in that, they're breaking up with rivals and all that. It's nothing like that at all. Again, Bryan's still with us. And we're still going to lean on him for recruiting information. And who knows, the whole gang might be back together down the road at some point. We just, it's just, it's time for me. And I think I don't want to speak for Larry, but kind of to do something a little different and to kind of change what we've been doing. My primary job will be, oddly enough, hosting a podcast. I'm also going to be kind of the beat writer for football and, lots of other cool stuff that I've kind of got in the back of my mind that I want to do, especially this summer. Because once you get into the season, it's kind of the same. But we'll do whatever we can to cover Memphis athletics, especially for me on the football side. This sounds terrible. They've got 4 or 5 guys that love Tiger basketball and just love basketball in general. So God bless them. And those are guys that can cover basketball better than just about anybody, especially, again, guys like Christian Fowler. But this was a hard way to think about it. And I'm not going to say I'm going to miss it because I'm still freaking doing it, just at a different address. And, Larry, again, I don't want to take words out of your mouth, but, I just think this is a chance to do something a little different.
Well, you came to me with it, and exactly what you said was what struck with me was the chance to do this, and then also they're giving money back to the university through the NIL, and to me that was what struck with me, was how their model actually will help the student athletes. It's one thing to cover student athletes. It's another thing to be involved in making that better. And it's not just the football and the basketball, the money making. They give and they assist all the student athletes at the University of Memphis. And we've tried at Rivals, we do cover as many of the sports as we possibly can. But they have a much larger group, and it makes that easier, I think. Would you not agree with that? Like, it makes it easier to free up, because I like baseball, but it's really hard with my schedule. But they have a larger group, and so that I can do it a little more passively, if you will, or at least not. There's a lot of times when I couldn't attend the baseball meetings and Zoom meetings, and hopefully I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that, things like that.
Yeah, and I want to say to Bryan, this is not the professional wrestling. Wish you the best in all your future endeavors, or I'm not buttering Bryan up just to hit him from behind with a chair. I genuinely mean that. My time. Bryan asked us to join Rivals, and I thought long and hard about that. Like, do I want to be a part of something, or do I want to just be independent? And I'm so thankful that I did. Um, but like I say, Bryan's going to keep on keeping on, especially with what, to me, and Bryan can speak more to this, recruiting is the heart and soul of what Rivals does. And Larry and I have said repeatedly, we don't care enough about what 17 and 18-year-old kids do to cover them. We care about what happens on the field, but
I barely care about my 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. So, there you go.
I care a lot about your kids. So Bryan, again, this is not goodbye. This is,
yep.
And again, you never know like what's going to happen in the future and how this is all going to work out. But I want to publicly thank you for the opportunity that you gave Larry and I to join up with you. And I'm forever grateful for that opportunity and for your friendship, because again, this is, I met Larry through Fairbanks, right? That's how we met, was Joey.
Yep.
11 years ago, 12 years ago.
In a while. Yeah, I have to. Joey reminds me at least once a year that it was because of me, and I was like, yeah, Joey.
That's right. The Tigers tonight took off, but I think that this will allow Bryan to get back to kind of the heart and soul too of what he does, which is recruiting and interviewing kids and talking to kids. Anyway, I wanted to publicly say that, and not, I don't want, although the Twitter sphere will think what they want to think and screw those guys, but I just want to put out into the ethos that this is nothing, I'm not leaving Rivals, I'm not
We're not angry or anything.
Yeah.
Like look, if this hadn't come up, we'd just be doing it the same way next year. Like it's not right. There's nothing.
And it's a good thing that what Bluff City Media is doing. I mean, I have great respect for them. I mean, nothing was behind anybody's backs. We all talked. So, I mean, I'll support them, just like you guys support me. I mean, so it's great. I mean, the only thing that's going to change really is the three of us, instead of this podcast being on, Tiger Sports Report YouTube channel, we're moving it over to Bluff City Media. And you guys obviously, will go with them as well, but the podcast is still going to be the same.
It's going to live, and
yeah,
it's just we're just moving houses, and
yep.
And it will. Well, I'm not going to say it won't. It's going to change because it's going to become a little more analytical and a little more number driven.
Yeah,
and some of those things. And the other thing Larry touched on about having a lot of guys is if there's a week I'm out of town, there's 5 guys over there fully capable and enjoy hosting podcasts, something I know the two of you don't particularly enjoy.
Yeah.
It's not really something you guys like to do, and I enjoy kind of being traffic cop.
Well, I just think people don't like to hear me talk that much. That's just
probably true. No, I'm just kidding. We'll ask Jennifer about that. Anyway, but no, I'm excited about the opportunity, and I'm excited about a new model and a new way of doing things. To move the university forward, to move student athletes forward, because we've had a lot of consternation about this, and we had a long conversation, me and about 3 or 4 other people on Twitter about this, that whether we like it or not, and I always say I have one rule, that's secure the bag, and when you're in doubt of what somebody should do, refer back to rule number 1, like always go get paid when you can get paid. Is it out of control? Sure. Is it going to settle down? Sure, because you're going to have things like return on investment and all that are going to creep into people's minds. But it's really, and I think Larry said this too, like it's not just about Quindell Johnson or Seth Hennigan. It's about the baseball second baseman. It's about the softball center fielder. It's about all of these, Olympic sports that don't get the love, don't get the coverage, don't get the NIL money. And so these collectives are a way to kind of spread the wealth a little bit. And we're going to embrace it. And, again, I prefer the analytical stuff. There's a dozen podcasts out there and a dozen sites that do so-and-so sucks and so-and-so's good. And I'm not interested in that anymore. And I just think it's time to, do something different. But again, we're not going away. Y'all are not getting rid of me that easily. I've been doing this for 10 years now. 11. Well, wait, we started during the Porter years, I think. So it's like 12, 13 years. It's been a long time. And so I've suffered through some bad football, and now it's time with good football and good basketball to kind of go through this rebirth of Memphis athletics. So that's our big announcement. For those not tuning in, this won't matter, but I'm going to post something on Twitter here in just a couple minutes. And but I wanted to be on the record publicly to thank Bryan and to just all the opportunities I've had are kind of due to the two of you. Anyway, I don't want to get too sentimental. Although it's 2023, I'm turning over a new leaf. I'm going to be positive Paul from now on. I'm going to be positive Paul at least for the next 72 hours until somebody makes me angry. Anyway, so Bryan, final thoughts on 2022 and as we go into 2023 and what we just talked about.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Like you said, we never know what the future holds. I think our partnership has been great, and that's going to continue. So yeah, nothing, in my opinion, nothing changes there because the three of us are still going to be on the podcast together. So yeah, that's perfectly fine with me. I'm so grateful to you guys as well for the past, I think, 2 years we've been together. It's been fantastic getting to know you guys, and that, I mean, in my opinion, nothing changes our friendship. So no matter where you guys are, so I'm thankful for that. And as far as the Tigers concerned, more people covering the Tigers is a great thing because this university, even though I'm not from Memphis, I've enjoyed covering Memphis for 16, 17 years or however long it's been now. So it's been fun getting to know all the coaches that I've met over the years from, Tommy West up until now at Silverfield and all the assistant coaches in between. I mean, my Rolodex is pretty large now with coaches that I've met because of Memphis. So, I'm looking forward to next year.
Larry?
I can only just add this. The last 2 years have taken our podcast. We had a nice thing going, but it has really exploded. And I don't think we would have done it without this platform or format. And one of the things that we all talked about in the middle of all this was that what the podcast that we have just sort of stumbled into really took on a life of its own. And I'm not overly sentimental either, but the last 2 years have been amazing. And I can't imagine where we would be without it. So again, thanks to Bryan, thanks to the entire, to all of our listeners, the people that actually want to hear me talk is shocking. So, but we appreciate you all, and we will be back, as they say.
Yeah, we've come a long way since Blog Talk Radio. I think we've it's changed just a little bit. I think that was the first platform was Blog Talk Radio, and then we got into audio podcast. We're moving to video primarily because that's where everything's going. I miss sometimes I miss the audio, but it's really hard to do a show like we're going to do and do it with audio because then you can't see the plays. You can't see what we're breaking down. So, all right, well, that's enough sentimental stuff. And for the final time for the 2022 season, I'm John Maddox, joined as always by the best co-hosts in all the land, Bryan Moss and Larry Marley. And we will see everybody soon.